Welcome to this session on key changes to the 2020 Vermont Residential Building Energy Standard, being presented by Efficiency Vermont on behalf of the Energy Code Assistance Center. I'm going to cover the substantial changes from the 2015 RBES to the new 2020 RBES, which will become in effect as of September 1st, 2020. So there are quite a few changes from RBES 2015 to RBES 2020, but we're going to cover some of the most important ones here today. There was clarification of definitions and other language from the 2015 code incorporated into the 2020. Some changes to insulation and fenestration or window criteria. Most importantly and most notably, prescriptive packages that were available through the prescriptive approach for both the base and stretch code now have a point system that is required based on the size of the house. Air leakage testing, blower door testing is now a requirement for all new construction and additions for both the base and stretch code. Electric resistance heating equipment is prohibited for use except under certain conditions that kind of take into account the use of efficient heat pump whole house heating systems. Electric vehicle charging requirements for base and stretch codes and for multifamily projects. So minimum charging stations and infrastructure are now required under those circumstances. The HERS rating option for compliance with the code takes into account an adjustment factor for building size and shape into the calculation, so it gives a more fair HERS assessment across different building types. This is both for base and stretch codes. And then also a solar PV ready requirement for stretch code. So base code compliance still has the three pathways that had been in play before, the prescriptive approach, the res check software method, or the energy ratings index or HERS rating method. Most notably, as mentioned in the previous slide, the prescriptive package approach now requires points to be earned based on the square footage of the building. So the 5 prescriptive packages that are available represent 5 major wall assembly types, above grade wall types. It did remove old package 5 or package 5 from 2015, which was another R20 cavity wall. So there is only one cavity only wall insulation package that is now available prescriptively. And that package does require an additional R value for foundations of R20 continuous or R13 plus 10 as your foundation wall options. There is an allowance now within the packages for R10 on slab edges, on exposed slab edges, and though that does require R7.5 at a minimum under the full slab. This applies for most of those packages. Maximum U value allowed for windows now is at 0.30. The log homes has its own prescriptive package, though log homes are not exempt from the points requirement. And there's also an alternative U factor option for meeting the full prescriptive compliance components of the prescriptive table. So here are the base prescriptive packages that are available in the 2020 RBES code. The items noted in red are all of the new additions to the prescriptive tables. So if you see in comparison to the 2015 code, there is quite a bit that has moved and changed and packages available for 2020. As noted, the bigger change here prescriptively is the points requirement in addition to meeting the full component specifications of the package chosen. So building, depending on the square footage, which the definition on this page defines how square footage is calculated for the purposes of these points. The associated number of points are required to be attained by improving some of the building components listed in the prescriptive packages, and which will be shown in the following slides. So the points that are available cover both building envelope improvement options as well as mechanical equipment. So points can be earned by increasing the R value under slabs, on above grade walls, roof and ceiling assemblies, better windows, better air tightness for the building envelope, better heating and ventilation equipment, including balanced use of balanced ventilation. Continuing with points, there are quite a few points that can be earned through water use, efficient water use, which is a new component being accounted for in the 2020 RBES code, as well as on-site renewables and solar-ready options for residential construction. So the stretch code tables are pretty much the same with a few minor differences between the two. So there is an option in the 2020 RBES for an alternative to meeting the full prescriptive package requirements listed in the prescriptive tables. This is a U-factor alternative. So the U-factor assembly values that are listed in table R402.14 are allowed as an alternative to meeting one of the prescriptive packages in table R402.121, but the building still must meet the points requirement based on building size that was shown in the previous two slides. So again, these are U-factor assembly values, not just cavity R values or components, but the full assembly value of different sections of the building. Assemblies with U-factors less than those listed in table R402.14 are allowed only if the building has an air tightness of less than or equal to 2 ACH50 versus a 3 ACH50, which is allowed prescriptively, and the requirement of balanced ventilation versus an exhaust-only ventilation option through the base code prescriptive package. Table R402.14 states the different building component assembly U values that are allowable under the U-factor alternative. Again, these are assembly values which need to be calculated given the assembly type that you are looking to substitute for prescriptive compliance and are referred back to at this table. Stretch code for 2020 RBES allows for two pathways for compliance. You can follow the prescriptive package plus points method also, as you would for the base code, but there is a specific package table with 3 different packages available and specific points requirements for stretch code. Alternatively, the HERS rating method is allowed as a pathway for stretch code compliance, where the ResCheck software is not an allowable compliance method for stretch code. Prescriptive compliance still does mandate that the base code requirements of Chapter 3, the general requirements, and the general requirements of Chapter 4, the residential energy efficiency, be met, as well as the full provisions of Section R407, which covers stretch code specifically. Here are the stretch code packages that are available, and similarly to the base code prescriptive package table, the changes that are for the 2020's RBES code versus the 2015 are highlighted in red. So there are really, other than a SIPS option available, all stretch code packages require continuous insulation of some type for above grade walls. And also notably, all prescriptive packages require balanced ventilation versus exhaust-only ventilation as a mechanical ventilation whole house option. Points again are required prescriptively for stretch code. Greater amount of points required under stretch than under the base code requirements. Same building size definitions as apply for the base code. And the points available in the points table is also found in section R407 under stretch code. The HERS rating or ERI rating option is still available in the 2020 RBES with some changes to the maximum HERS score allowed for compliance. So for the base code, a maximum HERS score of 61. Including the index adjustment factor taken into account. Up to 5 points of that score can be earned with renewables. Alternatively, for stretch code, a maximum score of 54 with up to 5 points also there earned through renewables. Building air tightness or blower door testing is now a requirement in the 2020 RBES for all new buildings and additions. A maximum of 3 ACH 50 for all compliance pathways. Alternatively, as noted before, ACH of 2 or less is required under some circumstances. There will be space on the modified RB certificate and form to be able to enter this data. And there's also text in the code that clarifies the conditions the building needs to be tested at, which is aligned with ResNet standards, ResNet being the entity that provides the testing methodology and HERS rating score. So some changes in regard to mechanical ventilation requirements for new buildings. There's clarification that both exhaust and balanced ventilation whole house systems have timers or controls on them. So basically allowing for the systems to run automatically without user intervention. Also calls out ventilation requirements being able to be met prescriptively or by way of design flow for building size, and allowing for some alternative methods for developing the building airflow rate CFM requirements, including the ASHRAE 62.2 standard, allowance for the Building Science Corp standard, and the Passive House Institute standards as alternatives to ASHRAE 62.2. It also does allow for the exception that controls for whole house systems be available to run on pollutant levels as an alternative to timer control or continuous operation. There's clarification in the 2020 RBES around requirements for exterior combustion air for combustion appliances within new buildings. Any building that is being built compliant to the 2020 RBES is considered an exceptionally airtight building. So open combustion is not allowed. So exterior supply air requirements apply to fireplaces as well as fuel gas systems. There were some clarifications around how those supply air requirements apply to wood burning assemblies, so fireplaces and wood burning appliances needing to have exterior air supply directly to the firebox, and also clarifications that a flue damper is not an alternative to a sealed gasketed fireplace door. There's new language in section R402.2.15 in regard to class 2 and 3 vapor retarders on building assemblies, wall assemblies specifically. So taking into account some of the different wall assembly types allowable for adequate moisture mitigation with different assembly components. So there's more detail on the different vapor retarder classes and different allowances for use of class 2 and class 3 vapor retarders with different wall assembly designs. There are some changes in the 2020 RBES for multi-family applications regarding vestibules, above parking garages, and lighting density for parking areas. There are some allowances made for not having programmable thermostats or exceptions for programmable thermostats, which take into account some of the modern heating and cooling equipment that is being put into new buildings. So there are some allowances as noted here in this section within section R403.11. So duct sealing is now mandatory for all forced air and ventilation ducted systems that follows the guidelines of the International Mechanical Code and the IRC. So this removes some exceptions that were available in the 2015 RBES for some alternative methods and materials in regard to ductwork. So some direct language called out in the 2020 RBs in regard to electric resistance heat and the prohibition of electric resistance heat in buildings, while also taking into account needs in buildings that are using cold climate heat pumps as the whole house heating system. So heat pumps having supplementary electric resistance heat need to be certified as cold climate heat pumps only and have controls that prevent that supplementary electric heat from coming on when the heat pump can meet the building heating load. There are other exceptions for buildings with cold climate heat pumps as the primary heating system. So that provides an allowance for limited areas within a building where distribution from a whole house heat pump system is not practical or reasonable, such as bathrooms, stairwells, something space distant from the distribution system. But given the certain specifications noted here, which are that the supplemental electric resistance heat is controlled to prevent it from operating at an outdoor air temperature of 5 degrees or higher, and that the building envelope has a tested air tightness of less than or equal to 2 ACH 50. The only other exception for electric resistance heat would be for an existing building or existing equipment where replacement of the electric resistance units is being done. Electric vehicle charging is a new component of the 2020 RBs. It comes into play in the base code in multifamily developments of 11 units or greater. It's aligned with the language regarding electric vehicle charging in the commercial building energy standard. So there is text and language in full that details the quantity, rules, exceptions of how this applies. Stretch code projects for single family require at least one level 1 electric vehicle parking space required. And multifamily for 10 units or more, there are requirements based on size. So there's a table associated to that requirement. So balanced ventilation or heat recovery ventilators or energy recovery ventilators are required for stretch code projects. And again, stretch code coming into play for any projects that require an Act 250 permit or in certain jurisdictions in the state that have adopted the stretch code as their local requirement. So HRVs or ERVs that are not integrated with forced air heating or cooling systems, so whole house systems, do not require duct testing. Similarly, in that circumstance, if there is a HRV integrated into a forced hot air heating or cooling system, an ECM motor is required on that furnace blower if that furnace blower motor is going to be used as a way to move the ventilation air. There are minimum CFM per watt requirements for HRVs or ERVs that's specified that are in line with the IECC 2018. Lighting, bumping up from 70%, 75% of lighting needing to be high efficacy from 2015 to now 90% of total lighting in a building to be high efficacy or LED essentially equivalent. There is some clarification in the language on determining the number of different lamps and fixture types within the building. Mainly this relates to how energy ratings are done and reporting of those components in the energy rating methodology. And finally, some definitions, additional building component definitions and clarifications that are provided in section R202, which is the general definitions section at the beginning of the code. So some further clarity on HRVs and ERVs, additional info on cold climate heat pumps, demand recirculation water systems, clarity on multifamily buildings, and single family building definitions. So section R202, the general definitions, is a good reference for clarity on the application of different components in the code. So that highlights the major changes from the 2015 RBES code to the 2020 RBES code. We do have additional training sessions that cover more of the full content and application of the 2020 RBES, which are available through the Energy Code Assistance Center. Additional information or questions on the RBES code and its application can be directed to the Energy Code Assistance Center or to the Vermont Department of Public Service at the contact info listed below. The 2020 RBES Energy Code Handbook will also be available and being distributed by the Vermont Department of Public Service as a guide to help the implementation of the 2020 RBES. It's important to distinguish the use of the RBES handbook versus the full rule of the 2020 RBES law. The handbook is a great resource for different building component assembly types and options and compliance methods for meeting the full rule of the code, but it is not meant as a substitute for the full content of the law, which can be obtained through the ICC or the International Code Council at the link included on this page, and the 2020 RBES Handbook, which is a publication in partnership with the Vermont Department of Public Service and the Energy Code Assistance Center, and is available through the Department of Public Service. Thank you for your time, and for more information or any questions, again, please feel free to reach out to the Energy Code Assistance Center or to me directly. Thanks for your time.